He was the last of the founding fathers. A soldier, diplomat, president. A man whose name is forever tied to one of the boldest and most ambitious policies in American history. Who was James Monroe? A shadow of the greats, or their worthy successor? Welcome to a past where the fate of the New World was being written. James Monroe was born in 1758 in Virginia, at a time when America was only beginning to dream of freedom. As a young man, he left college at just 18 to join the Continental Army, fighting shoulder to shoulder with George Washington. He was wounded in the Battle of Trenton, but his sacrifice was not in vain. It hardened his resolve and proved that Monroe was not just a politician on paper, he was a fighter. After the war, Monroe entered politics, becoming a protege of Thomas Jefferson. He rose rapidly through the ranks, senator, governor, and diplomat. He was in Paris during the Louisiana Purchase, a historic deal that doubled the size of the United States. Monroe himself was part of the negotiations. His signature appears on the fateful documents. But his true legacy was only beginning. The Monroe Doctrine, the cornerstone of his presidency. In 1823, he declared that America would no longer tolerate European interference in the Western Hemisphere. It wasn't just policy, it was a manifesto of New World ambition. Europe for Europeans, America for Americans, he said. These words rang out like a challenge, a shield raised against colonial history. But behind these bold declarations and a seemingly stable political climate, far more complex processes were unfolding. The era of good feelings, as Monroe's presidency came to be known, appeared to be a time of political unity. After the fall of the Federalist Party, Monroe's Democratic Republicans had virtually no opposition. For the first time in years, the nation seemed united and poised for growth. But this calm surface was hiding a growing storm. Monroe had a gift for saying what people wanted to hear. His modesty and approachability made him a man of the people. He traveled the country, met with ordinary citizens, listened to the complaints of farmers, veterans, and merchants. The public felt that someone like them was in the White House. Yet behind closed doors, contradictions were building that would eventually tear the young republic apart. The issue of slavery was becoming more and more urgent. In 1820, a crisis erupted that threatened national unity, the Missouri Compromise. The issue was simple. Would slavery be allowed in the new state of Missouri? North and South clashed fiercely. Monroe stood at the center of this conflict. As a man from the South, he understood the concerns of slaveholders. But as president of the entire country, he saw the danger of division. A compromise was reached. Missouri entered the Union as a slave state, while Maine entered as a free state. Slavery was prohibited in the rest of the Louisiana Territory north of the 36°30' parallel. Monroe signed the act with a heavy heart. He knew this was only a temporary truce, not a real solution. Balanced scales inside his administration, a new generation of young political titans was emerging. John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun. Monroe watched them closely. He didn't seek glory or domination, rather he acted as a mediator, an architect of balance. He dreamed of leaving the country not only stronger but whole. In letters to friends he wrote, "We have won our liberty, now we must win peace among ourselves." But even the greatest architects can't always stop a building from cracking. The cracks began to appear not just in politics, but in the economy. In 1819, America was shaken by its first major financial crisis, the Panic of 1819. The banking system collapsed under the weight of wild speculation, especially in Western lands. People lost farms, homes, savings. Small businesses went bankrupt. Unemployment surged. Even areas that had recently seen economic growth fell into poverty. Monroe found himself in a difficult position. As president, he had no direct tools to influence the economy. The Federal Reserve didn't exist, the banking system was decentralized, and government intervention was viewed with suspicion. A believer in limited government, Monroe hesitated to take drastic action. Instead, he sought to restore public confidence through moderation and open dialogue with the states. Military medals. Despite internal troubles, Monroe continued to strengthen America's global position. He and Secretary of State John Quincy Adams conducted delicate diplomacy aimed at expanding U.S. influence. In 1819, the Adams-Onís Treaty was signed with Spain, through which the U.S. acquired Florida. It was a peaceful expansion, a diplomatic victory that showed the world the U.S. was no longer a fledgling country, but a rising power with defined borders and ambitions. United States. But it was in 1823 that Monroe defined his ultimate legacy. He addressed Congress with a message that would go down in history as the Monroe Doctrine. It was a political manifesto that forever established America's stance in global affairs. The American continents are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European powers. This was a revolutionary idea. Monroe didn't just mark a geographic boundary, he proclaimed the independence of an entire hemisphere. Latin America, freshly liberated from Spanish rule, received the unspoken protection of the United States. It was a geopolitical reset, and the world heard America's voice, confident, mature, and sovereign. Globe showing Europe-Africa. The European monarchies responded cautiously but understood. They now had to reckon with Washington. Monroe, however, remained remarkably humble. He didn't seek personal glory or build a cult of personality. When his presidency ended, he quietly stepped down, refusing to run for a third term. Like Washington and Jefferson before him, he returned to private life. But fate had one more trial in store for him. After completing his second term in 1825, James Monroe left the White House as he had promised. He had no hunger for power, no thirst for immortality. For him, the most important work was already done. He had left the country stronger than he found it. But his departure was not marked by peace. Financial difficulties that had begun during the Panic of 1819 now caught up with him personally. Like Thomas Jefferson, Monroe died a poor man. He had spent much of his life in public service, not in building wealth. He even had to request reimbursement from Congress for personal expenses incurred during his diplomatic missions in Europe. Broken heart after the death of his beloved wife Elizabeth in 1830, his partner of nearly 45 years, Monroe became lonely and emotionally worn. His health declined and he moved to New York to live with his daughter. It was there, far from his native Virginia, that he died on July 4, 1831. Calendar the fact that he died on Independence Day just like Jefferson and John Adams, who both died on July 4, 1826, shocked the American public. It seemed almost mystical, as if history itself had chosen that day to bid farewell to its heroes. Dubbed the legacy of James Monroe is hard to overstate. He was the last president of the Revolutionary generation, the last of the Founding Fathers to occupy the Oval Office. He led the country through a rare period of peace and political unity. His Monroe Doctrine became a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy for generations. His name lives on in towns, counties, universities, and even in a country. Liberia named its capital Monrovia in his honor. Military medal James Monroe was not as eloquent as Jefferson, as brilliant as Hamilton, or as charismatic as Washington. But he was the one who bridged their era with the future. Calm, determined, humble, he was the quiet guardian of a new American era. And when Americans today look back on the early 19th century, they inevitably come to the name of the man who didn't just speak noble words, but gave his country political maturity and a clear direction. United States James Monroe, the fifth President of the United States. The last of the generation that forged a nation. The silent sentinel of a new age.